Every laptop bag claims to be perfect, but they always end up like this. Chaotic. 1 second you're digging for a pen, the next second you're falling to the abyss. When you think of bags, you generally don't think about 3D printing. And the ones that are 3D printed are more like rigid toolboxes or very intricate and complex fashion statement pieces. And nothing's wrong with either of those. I just want to try making something different. That's why for today's project, I have a bunch of quirky ideas, and I think a laptop bag is the perfect vehicle to try these experiments. So, let's jump into it. Okay, let's quickly talk about today's project guidelines. Merriam-Webster definition of a bag is usually a flexible container that may be closed, used to hold, store, or carry something. So let's make sure our bag is somewhat flexible. And of course, point number 2, it should be able to hold my laptop. And I have the 13.6 MacBook Air. And the last point, it should incorporate some kind of fabric. I love to mix different mediums with 3D printing, but more on that later. Let's now talk about the design. I absolutely love a good desk pad. There's something about having a designated space for your work area that just makes it feel more structured and organized. I think having a desk pad integrated into a laptop bag is honestly such an innovative idea. And there's a company called Usual that does exactly that. I love how minimal this bag is and how it's inspired by origami. It also has some really cool magnetic accessories. They actually show the internal makings of this, and I think I have a good idea. For this design, we'll obviously need a large printer, which is a perfect segue to today's sponsor, Prusa. Prusa has been a great supporter of this channel, and I had the chance to meet up with them at Open Sauce, where they showcase a bunch of cool stuff. I got to meet the team, and I got to check out the Excel before I set it up. I've had this machine for a while now and I absolutely love it. Because it has 5 different extruders, not only does it mean you can have 5 different colors, you can have 5 different types of filament. For example, I have PLA, TPU, and PETG in these. And because it has 5 different extruders, it means it's one of the fastest multicolor 3D printer on the market. To give you a quick scale of the build volume, here's a Core 1 build plate. And here's an XL. That's insane. And my favorite part, no more filament poop. So huge thanks to Prusa for supporting this channel and making projects like this possible. While that's printing, let's talk about the design and other inspirations behind this project. I've been following people like Variable Seams, who make some really cool and inspirational 3D printed textiles. The most common approach is to first print down your initial layer. You'll then want to put down your fine mesh and put down magnets to really hold it down. You'll then print another layer on top. By doing this, the layers should go between the mesh, forming a bond, leaving you with a mesh with 3D printed textiles, or in this case, Play-Doh. But it should look something like this. It's such a cool approach, but it got me thinking that I still want to use traditional textiles for this project. Now, I don't know if there's a name for the next approach, but I'll just call it clamping for now. And it's the idea of wedging fabric between 2 3D prints. For example, if I place some fabric on this bottom piece and wedge it between another 3D print, I've instantly added texture which feels more elevated. Another way I saw this being done is how Aiden Archive does this. He does this by screwing in a back piece to really clamp down the fabric. And by doing this, he creates some really beautiful pieces with 3D prints with fabric. And the final approach and what I'm going to be doing is actually just sewing it. Sewing is one of the oldest textile arts, and it's something I've never done. And if I want to be innovative about how fabric is incorporated with 3D prints, I think it's fundamental to understand the basics of something before disrupting it. And this is a miniature version of what we're designing today. The plan is to print 2 of these. I'll then sew a sleeve for each side and then sew them together. I did think about printing a border and then clamping the fabric in between. Then I realized it would be very rigid and it would be more of a briefcase, not a bag. But I do think it's a fun approach for a future project. Now, some of you might be thinking this is a huge waste of time, that I should have just used foam instead of 3D printing the infill. And you'd be absolutely right. But once again, I've never sewn anything in my life, and this just felt like a good beginner project to work on. My end goal of this exploration is to find an easy way to incorporate fabric into 3D prints. Now imagine instead of something flat, we created something more complex, something like a custom wheelchair cushion. If we could somehow find an easy way to incorporate fabric into that design, it suddenly becomes more interesting. Also, shout out to Make Good, who make innovative designs around accessibility and disabilities. So each of these actually takes 16 hours to print, and I've never printed anything longer than 10 hours before. So I'm hoping that nothing goes wrong. But I don't know. We'll just have to see. How sick is this? This is crazy. I usually like to break my large prints because I'm afraid of part of it failing, then having to throw away the whole thing and starting over. But this worked flawlessly. I gotta say the Prusa XL really did its thing. And how sick is that? So a few things I loved about this so far. The biggest thing is TPU and PETG usually don't bond very well, but I use the interlocking feature on Prusa Slicer that creates cross-hatching boundaries between the two different filaments. And it's just, like look, it will not separate. That blows my mind. There's PETG that goes all the way across. I actually saw this on the usual bags. It's a really good idea because it evenly distributes the weight when it's being pulled down. And here you can see actually a test print of when I was testing on a smaller bag that's made entirely of TPU. When you hold the top and you have some weight across, it gets really deformed. So a strong bar that goes across is really useful. Another thing is I paused the print to insert magnets. When I went up to the printer to put the magnets in, I realized I'd never tested the fit. And so I was super scared that I would have wasted the print, but luckily it worked out. The magnet sizes are inconsistent, so some of them are thicker, which causes some over extrusion, but I'm not worried because we're gonna be covering the whole thing. I can't get over this. I could honestly stop here and I'd be happy. But there is one thing I'm starting to notice, and that's magnets. It works well now, but once you add 2 millimeters of felt in between, I don't think it's gonna work well. And it's honestly a big oversight by me. I just went back to Usual's website and I saw that they use a rating of N45 for their magnets, and the ones I found on Amazon don't even have a rating, which, yeah. But this is just an experiment. And these magnets are stuck in there, so I'm not taking them out. So I went back to Amazon to buy stronger magnets. Instead of N45, they only had N52. I'm realizing that the number correlates with how many pounds it can hold. So the magnets I have currently inside the bag can hold up to 18 pounds. Usual uses N45, and the ones I bought on Amazon are N52. And I'm thinking that these might be too strong. Like, look. That's through the box. And I don't think I want my laptop around something that's this strong. So I'm just gonna keep the weak magnets in for now. But I thought this was super funny. You might have noticed some placeholders for magnets, and that's for some bonus surprise accessories I plan on showing you at the end of the video. So stick around. We can finally move on to the sewing portion. We have an embroidery machine that I think we can use as a sewing machine. I bought that for a project that I never did. But looking good so far. All right, let's go. Okay, it's super dusty, and the more I get the supplies out, I'm starting to realize I have no clue what I'm doing. Whenever I'm working on some content videos, I feel like I'm going through like an emotional roller coaster of excitement, doubt, fear, anxiety, kind of at the doubt phase, but also very excited. Let's wipe this off and set it up. This turned out a lot better than I expected, and the sewing machine might be the most useful thing I've learned in a while. There's still a few things I want to try before wrapping up this project, and that's creating some 3D printed accessories. The first accessory is a 3D printed TPU strap. And this is something I also learned from watching Make Good and Joelle. It really surprised me how easy it was to print this and how strong it is. Next is padding for shoulder straps. And this is something I haven't seen people do. I'm not sure why more people don't do this because this looks exactly like what I see on backpacks. The gyroid pattern really provides ventilation and soft padding. I also got to try something that I haven't tried before, and that's using PETG as support for TPU. I've seen some people do this online and it created really clean supports. And with the Prusa XL, I was able to do multiple filaments. And the last one is just a simple handle. But the fun thing I want to do with this is I want to dip it in Plasti Dip. I actually never knew what Plasti Dip was until I saw a post by Craig Hill. And they were going around the office just Plasti Dipping random things. And I thought it would be such a perfect way to add texture to 3D prints. So I'm really excited to try that. But we'll do this one last because it takes 12 to 24 hours to dry. So let's start with this because I'm really curious about the supports. This was a really lazy design, so there's a slit here, just ignore it. You'll see why in a minute. But you can see the PETG supports, and this is where the strap will go. Wow, surprisingly, it's easier than I thought it'd be. You know, I thought this would be a lot harder. Wow. That is so cool. That's looking pretty good. Once again, this whole thing is just an experiment just to play around with some techniques. The handle will go here like this. And because there's straps on both sides, the padding will kind of need to link both of them. So it was just a quick and dirty way of making this. But this is so cool. I actually might just make a couple of these for my camera straps or something. That was quicker than I expected. Okay, let's move on to this. All right, I've created this workstation here. I also realized I didn't explain what Plasti Dip is. Plasti Dip is just rubber coating, and all you need to do is dip the item into the container. The coating is very similar or what you find on tools for the handle for texture, for grip. I also went ahead and put painter's tape all over where I don't want the Plasti Dip to be on. And that's because this is high friction areas where the bag will be or where the straps will be. I feel like if it's on there, it's very high possibility of coming off. The goal is to just have it where your hands are, but I have no clue if this painter's tape is the right approach. I also feel like you should sand it before, but I'm lazy, so this will just be a good controlled experiment. What I read online is you want to stir it for a few minutes because it has a bunch of oils and it's just been sitting for a long time. While I do this, if you made it this far, if you could like the video or comment, subscribe if you haven't, it'll really help me out. But after doing this, I really want to create an everyday carry bag where there's no sewing involved, but still uses fabric. Leave me a comment what you think. So the instructions say to dip it 1 inch every 5 seconds, then withdraw at the same rate. So that's what we'll do. Oh my God, is it gonna overflow? Why didn't I think about this? Oh, it's so close. We'll just dip it from this side. I will say it smells pretty strong. I didn't think this far ahead. It was a lot easier in my mind. Oh, perfect. I think that's good. It says to wait a minimum of 4 hours, but we'll just let it sit overnight. This whole project was far from perfect, and there's a long list of improvements. The rubber coating worked well, but it was so rough around the edges. The bag can't hold my laptop. The straps are too shiny. And this wasn't the most difficult thing I've ever 3D modeled. But that was never the goal. It was to learn new ways to use materials and new skill sets. Combining 3D printing with sewing was a marriage of two worlds: digital fabrication and traditional craftsmanship. Threads meeting filament. We add different textures not because we have to, but because we want to feel something more. It's the difference between something that's made and something that's felt. We can leverage 3D printing to introduce modular components. The strap pad suddenly becomes a comfortable wrist rest. We can carry laptop stands that conveniently fold flat, attach magnetic stands that carry aspirations to keep us focused. If you'd like to make this bag for yourself, you can find the model on my Patreon. I want to give a shout out to my amazing active members, and a huge thank you to you for watching. Until next time, keep making stuff.